So, Dr. Chaffee, the first thing that I hear a lot that might be ruining people's results is following carnivore trends. What are your thoughts about that?
So I sort of think like, just like an egg fast or a sardine fast or what kind of trends?
Yes. So, a lot of the times we hear trends like a sardine fast, an egg
Mhm.
fast, whether it be specific macros, all of
Mm.
these different things to try to get faster results. In your opinion, does that matter as much?
No, I think if you're only eating meat and you're not eating all the other things and you're only drinking water, I think those are the main things that people need to worry about. That gives the best results for the most amount of people. And if someone finds that they do really well with eggs, then great, eat eggs. That's totally fine. Some people don't do as well with eggs. Some people find that they do best with red meat. I've heard a few people say that just eating a whole bunch of sardines that they actually felt good and all that sort of stuff. That's fine, but really, what you should do is eat the meat that tastes good to you, that you enjoy, and makes you feel the best, and that you can afford. Other than that, I don't think it matters as much. Obviously, what the animals being fed does matter. But if you're getting a bunch of soy fed pigs, then that can cause a bit of a reaction, or chicken or eggs and things like that. But if you're doing well with bacon and you're doing fine with eggs and you feel good with that, then I don't think there's a problem with that. Really, I think it's just the most important thing is just eating proper nutrition, eating meat and animal fats, and not eating all the other things. I think that is 99.9% of this, and what people get the best results on is just doing that.
So, do you see a place for any of these trends? So, say, for example, when you hear from Dr. Boz, she will talk about the 3 day sardine fast, and that's for people that want to lower their insulin resistance. Do you think that might be better than just doing plain old carnivore meat, salt, and water?
I don't think so. I mean, I would be interested to see why she thought so. I mean, I haven't really looked into her exact arguments on that. So she might have very, very robust arguments on it, but I really can't see anything myself, just off the top of my head, having not seen her arguments for that. But you've eliminated carbohydrates and sugar and alcohol and lectins and all these other things that affect your insulin. And when you're just eating meat, be it sardines or something else, your insulin is going to start going back to normal, and you're going to start reducing your insulin resistance. And there's other people that don't think that insulin resistance is a real thing. It's more to do with the Randall cycle. And again, you're going to fix that by not eating a combination of carbohydrates and fat and protein, when you're just down to just eating meat. So whatever the mechanism, whether it's a Randall cycle or insulin resistance, it's still being addressed just by eating meat and animal fats. And so I don't necessarily see why sardines in particular would help reduce your insulin resistance or insulin levels more than just steak. And in fact, I do see my patients all the time. We check their blood work, check their insulin, their fasting insulin levels, and their HbA1c, and all of them improve every time by going on a carnivore diet, regardless of the meat that they eat.
Also, just one more question about that. When it comes to ketosis, ketones, and glucose,
Mhm.
so sardines is not better than just eating plain, like for example, beef, salt, and water.
I wouldn't think so, no. Yeah.
Okay.
And in fact, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have as much fat as a fatty ribeye would, for instance. So you're getting more protein than fat. May not be enough fat. I mean, you need fat, you need protein. They're not just calorie sources, and they can't be independently traded. You need fat, you need protein, you need both of these things. That is complete nutrition. People talk about a well-rounded diet, a balanced diet. That's what it actually is. You're a balance of the macro and micronutrients that you need, and you get that from eating the fat and the lean meat as well. So you need both.
Okay. Well, that goes into the second thing that might be ruining people's results, and the thing I hear about a lot, which is purposely lowering your protein to heal inflammation.
I haven't really come across that before with the inflammation side of things. I mean, I have heard people say that you want to keep your protein intake down under a certain threshold so you don't spike your insulin, which doesn't really you don't really get spikes. It can sort of come up a bit. But when you're eating carbohydrates with protein, which is pretty, it doesn't really exist in nature outside of, breast milk. So when you're seeing sort of that combination, that's not normally something that you'd sort of eat in the wild. So when you're eating carbohydrates as well as protein, you look at the glycemic index, protein will have a bigger effect on insulin and blood sugar at that point. But when you're not eating carbohydrates with it, it actually is a much lower response, is a much lower glycemic number. So at the end of the day, I don't really much care, because I think of things as going back to first principles, biologically, what are we supposed to eat? We're supposed to eat meat, and we're supposed to eat fatty meat, but we're supposed to eat meat. And so as long as you're doing that, it doesn't really matter what your body's doing. Is your body in ketosis 24/7? Or is it coming out slightly and then going back into it? Like, well, whatever it's doing, it's supposed to be doing that, because that's how we're designed. We are designed to eat meat. And so if we slip out of ketosis for a second and then get back into it, then that's totally fine. I have never in my entire life checked my ketones. And I don't care to, because I don't think it matters. I know I'm in ketosis because I'm not dead. I have blood sugar, so I'm making it. And so, I'm still here, I'm still active, I'm still feeling great. So, whatever's happening, it's supposed to happen.
Absolutely. Trust in your body's biochemistry. The other thing that a lot of people hear about is the protein leverage hypothesis. Have you heard about that one?
Not by that name anyway.
Basically, your body is going to need a certain amount of protein, and that if you don't get enough protein, you'll eat enough energy or calories until you get that sufficient amount of protein required for your body.
Yeah, well, it does go the other way. And you have like protein starvation, rabbit starvation, or protein poisoning sort of things. We're eating such lean meat, and you're getting that as a majority of your calories. And for some people, for some reason, people just voraciously eat, and they can't eat enough. They just keep eating and eating and eating and eating and eating, and then they die. People have died from that historically. And I sort of think of that as you need those nutrients apart from protein. You need something else coming in. Your body's just ravenously going after it. And something I've said before is that your body tracks nutrients. It does not, and it chases nutrients. It does not chase calories. Body doesn't know what a calorie is. That's a human invention. And we have receptors in our stomach that look for the different macros and micros, and it tracks up your brain. Tracks up your brain through the vagus nerve, and tells your brain, hey, these are the nutrients that are coming down the pipe. And this is why you can have food in your stomach and your brain just goes, yep, that's fine. And you just sort of, I'm not really hungry anymore. You haven't absorbed it. It's not in your body. You don't see those sorts of changes yet. Your body knows ahead of time what's coming down the pipe, and it says, no, we can stop eating here. And if you're not getting enough, your body keeps eating. And this is why that whole fad diet of just eating a whole bunch of fiber in the 80s was not effective for weight loss. People got fatter and sicker, and obesity rates just went higher and higher and higher. I think at the time they were around 8%. Now it's 42% obesity. So that didn't work. And it just kept going up even in the 80s as they were doing this. And that's because they said that, well, you eat a bunch of fiber and it's this mass, but because you can't break down fiber and these things that basically no nutrition in them, that, or no calories certainly, that you can eat as much as you want. It fills you up, and it hits those stretch receptors and releases some leptin, and your brain goes, oh, we're full, we're fine, everything's fine. And but people weren't fine. They felt miserable. They were always hungry. They were bloated. They didn't feel well. And this goes down to eating disorders and avoiding eating, and then being so desperate to eat something without some actual nutrition in it that they binge, and then they feel so guilty that they purge. And so that's where you see this sharp incline in these eating disorders, as well as in the late 70s and 80s. So that's what was happening. Your brain knew damn well that there wasn't any nutrition coming down the pipe. It was just, you could have just eaten a bag of styrofoam for all your stomach knew. It's just like, well, there's nothing in here that's worthwhile. And so you need to eat something. So people are always really hungry. And so, yeah, I think that if you're not getting enough, again, you need protein, you need enough amino acids, you need enough of the vitamins and nutrients that come with those amino acids. And if you're not getting them, your body's going to keep telling you to go get them. which is hunger.
Now, the third thing that people always ask is how much fat? How much fat should we be eating? You know, the one stick of butter, all these different things. How much
Mhm.
fat should we be having, especially people coming to carnivore? They want to heal, they want to lose weight. What's your answer to that one?
Just as much as your body needs. That's why, or that's how much. And so it's going to be different for everyone. It's difficult to make a meal plan for people. I talk to people and they say, hey, look, I just need to tell, I weigh this much. I want to weigh this much and I'm this height, how much should I be eating? What should I be eating? What should my macros be? All this. I can't tell you that. Everyone's different. Everyone's bodies are different. Their metabolism is different. There are different stages of fat loss or muscle development. And so, you're going to need to eat an individual amount. Most people do pretty well with around 1 gram of each. 1 gram protein, 1 gram fat. And that ends up being 70% calories from fat, 30% from protein, just because more nutrient or calorically dense, which is a horrible way of measuring this stuff. It's not a real measure because we're not combustion engines. We're chemical factories and power plants. And so these are all individual organic chemicals that have individual chemical reactions in our body. So I think it's terrible to think of things as just calories and extremely inaccurate on how it actually affects your body. But if we're just talking about grams, and people know calories, so you just sort of talk about it in those terms. But grams wise, equal grams of fat and protein seems to be about where most people are at. Now, now people are going to be different, and I think you just have to adjust for how you feel. So maybe some people will be a bit more fat, some people will be a bit less fat. But you need enough fat, you need enough protein. It usually shakes out to being roughly equal, sometimes differently. I think that it's easier to figure out how much uh, fat you need because your body has a limited capacity to absorb fat. You have a bile, and your liver makes bile, like makes it slowly over the day. Just keeps making it sort of continuously. And once you run out of bile, it's very difficult for your body to absorb fat. And it can absorb some, but it's low percentages. And so the rest of it just goes out, right? And so this is why people, when they start a carnivore diet, they get disaster pants, as Joe Rogan called it. And first of all, I think Joe Rogan's probably still drinking coffee, and that's definitely a laxative. And so now you're not clogging the pipes with a bunch of fiber. And so that's going to be much more dramatic at that of an effect at that point. But if you're eating a lot more fat than your body can absorb, it will come out. It will come out in liquid form. And so, if you're not doing anything, if you're not having coffee, you're not having artificial sweeteners, you're not on medication that's going to, speed things up, and you're getting loose stools, it could be that you're eating too much fat. You sort of pull that back and things normalize. Well, there you go. Right. But it's very difficult to eat too much fat because you just don't absorb it. Right. And so if you're going to eat too much fat to the point that your body is just, doesn't want it, it's going to come out. Right. You can absorb a bit after that, but to get too much, whereas like a lot more is being absorbed than your body wants, I mean, you're going to have to eat so much that you're just going to have like copious amounts of diarrhea. Like it's not really practical to keep doing that. And so, I just do not think that our bodies are making a random amount of bile. Our bodies are so exacting in the different things that do, unless you have some sort of illness. But I mean, the people that would have some weird issue with making the wrong amount of bile, I mean, I think you could probably safely dismiss that. I've never heard of that as a thing, but our bodies are so exacting on what it does and makes, because these are resources and energy and that your body is putting into this. And if you're just making a random amount and that's the only way you're going to get fat in a real way, then it needs to be specific because your body needs a specific amount of fat. It doesn't want too much, but it doesn't want too little. It needs that nutrition source. Right. So your body's going to make a very specific amount of bile because I think it wants a very specific amount of fat. And after that, it just goes away. And taste is a big driver. Again, your brain tracks the nutrients that are coming in. And when you're eating, it at first, if you're hungry, it tastes amazing. And then you keep eating and it stops tasting as good, and you eventually get to a point where it's just like, this is just not enjoyable. Well, why is that? It's the same piece of meat cooked at the same time in the same conditions. It's the same chemicals, should have the same chemical reaction, but it's not as simple as that. It's your brain recognizing the nutrients. Now they want them, now they don't, right? And so they're going to be expressed differently, and you can get pretty bored of lean meat pretty quickly if you eat just, ground beef or something like that. It's just like, well, that's boring. You start adding some fat in there or some bacon, like, whoop, nope, that's good. And so, you can go by your taste as well, and just eat fatty meat until it stops tasting good. Check your stools. If you're drying hard and constipated, then increase the fat. You definitely are not getting enough fat if that's the case. And if you're getting loose stools, then it's too much. And so you just sort of just see your body. But it's usually that 1-to-1 is pretty good. Then there's like the 80-20 is 2-to-1 fat grams to protein grams. Some people do better on that. Some people do better on a bit less fat. So aim for 1-to-1 at first, and then take a look at what your body actually wants and is asking for and what tastes good to you, and just do that. It should be intuitive. Just don't skip on the fat.
Absolutely. You see, Dr. Chaffee makes it very simple. When he talks, it's like, oh, yes, this is easy. This is doable. And I think that the carnivore foods that we're going to talk about with our game is going to help people understand this is maybe too lean, this is maybe too fat, this is good, this is not so good. So that's going to help as well. But another food that is so joyful for many people is cheese. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it ruins our results. What's your thoughts about cheese?
Yeah, I think that's one that a lot of people can stall on if they're trying to lose body fat, or even put on body fat. They can put on weight. Again, your body's tracking nutrients, and cheese and milk and dairy and things like that have a lot of nutrients that we need. They're very good. Some things we don't necessarily want as much of, like casein, the milk proteins, can be pro-inflammatory. And so, especially for people with autoimmune issues, they really need to think twice about that, because most of them will react negatively to dairy, even A2 dairy. There's A1 and A2 proteins. A2 is much less inflammatory than A1, but it's actually still inflammatory. So it's not perfect anyway. A lot of people will find that they'll eat dairy, but their body still wants the other nutrients that come with meat that aren't in the dairy. So a lot of people will eat pretty much the same amount of meat in a day and the dairy as well. So they'll eat some dairy, and it doesn't actually offset the amount of meat that they eat. And so in fact, they'll end up eating, more than their body may want, and they're maybe pro-inflammatory and all that sort of stuff. So I do see that people do go a little overboard on the cheese. Now, if some people don't have a problem with cheese and they don't react poorly to it, and you want to melt some cheese on some eggs or meat or something like that, fine. But the problem is, as soon as you say, yes, dairy is okay, but they don't hear anything after the but. They just hear, oh, dairy's good. And so they're just dumping down, gallons of milk. They're eating tons of cheese. They're just chewing on blocks of cheese and eating, tubs of yogurt and things like that. And, talking to people, it's like, oh, I'm starting putting on weight. Like, what's going on? And you look at what they're eating. It's like, well, I don't have any doubt that you would be, And so, yeah, just something that people need to be mindful of. And so many people, they'll just say, you ask them what they're eating. It's like, oh, well, I'm not, not having the results I want or whatever. And you're like, okay, well, what are you eating? Like, what's going on? And they were like, oh, mostly halloumi. I'm like, wait, what? And they just go to Costco, and they get like a 6-pound tub of halloumi cheese, and they just just fry that up every day. And they're just eating just blocks of cheese like all day, every day. And it's just like, okay, that's not what we're doing here. The diet is meat. Meat is the meal. That's where you get your nutrients from. And milk, of course, has lactose, and it can have enough lactose that it can raise your insulin, and that can upset your metabolism in a lot of ways, and put you in a fat storage metabolism as opposed to a fat burning metabolism. So it's just something to remember. The meat is the meal. That's what you want to eat. Eat meat, fatty meat, water. You can salt if you want to. You don't have to. Most people do just fine without salt, and some people swear by the fact that they have taken out salt, and they feel much better for that as well. So, but meat, water, cheese is a bit of a gray area. I really would avoid milk. Raw milk is obviously better than pasteurized milk, but I certainly wouldn't do it every day. I would just keep that as like a rare special occasion, and just eat meat and be happy and get on with your life.
Now, the other thing that is gives people so much joy along with the cheese is some alcohol. I'm keen to hear your thoughts because I don't think that many people following the carnivore lifestyle drink every day. It's probably infrequent. But in your opinion, even infrequent amounts of alcohol, is that going to affect people's results?
Well, I mean, yeah, of course it will, and it depends on what people define as infrequent. It is poison, and it's a serious one, and it will upset your metabolism in a lot of ways, and it will kick on different genes and set off inflammatory pathways that actually take about 3 weeks to really start clearing up. And it's not that you're hungover for 3 weeks or anything like that. It's just that you don't feel your best, you don't have the same energy, and it's just something's like something's just a bit off, and that's what it is. And so I've noticed that in myself, I've noticed that in others, and it's about 3 weeks until you start getting back to feeling like a superhero again, which is the whole point. Some people do drink on carnivore. They generally do it very rarely, and they try to keep it to like spirits, like hard alcohol, like just clear vodka and things like that. No mixers, putting with like, club soda, soda water or something like that, and that seems to be, better, but you'll still have 3 weeks that you're recovering from that until you feel, like your old self. And so people generally just naturally will drink less and less and less, and just because they don't want to feel bad, they want to feel good all the time. Alcohol is a big one for people falling off because, they think it's all or nothing. If they ever want to have something outside of carnivore, that means that they're not able to do it at all, and they're just going to go back to eating pizza and donuts. And of course that's not the case. If it's a special occasion and you want to drink sometime, or even if you want to drink regularly, it's still better to drink like the hard alcohol, things like that, without all the mixers and the sugars and the beers and the wines and things like that that have all the other nasty stuff in them, and not eat all the other garbage that goes along with that, than to drink all that stuff and eat all the garbage as well, right? It's always better to eat less poison, right? It's if you're going to have some drinks every now and then, that doesn't mean that you have to go back and eat that way, and it doesn't mean that you have to go back to drinking multiple times a week or even once a week. So it's but it is something. I'll have friends that have been on carnivore for like 8 months and like, wow, I've never felt better, everything's great. They're like, yeah, but I went out and I really want to go, I had a buddy in town and we went out drinking and stuff like that. So I was just like, oh yeah, I guess it's just not for me. It's like, no, you can do that. You can have that time, but just don't try not to make it as too often. It's going to affect you for 3 weeks. It's going to knock you back for 3 weeks. So, just make it worth 3 weeks of your life. Not many things meet that criteria for me. And so I happily just don't drink. I was fortunate that, I chose to stop drinking during the rugby season when I was 21. Like after my 21st birthday, I got pneumonia, and I was just like, I couldn't drink about a month. And I went out, to bars after the rugby games. I just felt so self-conscious. It's just so weird that I was the only one not drinking. After a couple times doing that, I just didn't care. And then I actually preferred it, and I was playing so much better and feeling so much better that I was just like, wow, I'm just not going to drink the rest of the season, see how it goes. Had the best season of my life. And then the next season I was like, okay, I'm going to do it, because I was like halfway through the season. So I was like, all right, well, I'll do this for the whole season next time. And I, again, had like the best season of my life. And so it was like, okay, well, I'm not going to drink during the rugby season. So I'm already used to that. I'm already happy to not drink. I have no problem going out and being in social gatherings and going to bars and going to dinners and things like that where everyone else is drinking and I'm not drinking. It doesn't matter. And people really don't care. Some people might say, oh, why aren't you having a drink? Oh, why don't you have a drink with me? It's nice. It's a social sort of bonding thing that people get used to doing. But after that, it's like, oh no, I really don't drink, and you're just drinking water. Like they stop caring so quickly. Like it's just not a big deal. There are studies that actually show that people's inhibitions to eating crappy food and especially like, sugars and carbs and things like that, actually it goes down when you drink alcohol. So people are much more likely to eat that sort of ultra processed garbage food, sugars and carbs, when drinking, or in and actually up to a few days after you a night out drinking. So it's just to understand that you can start getting carb cravings again, you can start getting sugar cravings again. These things hit very similar pathways in our brain and our bodies, especially alcohol and fructose. And so, you can find that, you're dealing with those sorts of things. So if you want to drink, I just would keep it very rare, if at all. And, trying to keep it to spirits, and just be mindful. Hey, this is a one-off, and you don't let it, take you completely off the wagon, and get you away from doing what is healthy. I mean, that's the main thing. You want to do something here and there, like that's fine, but you shouldn't do something that's going to tear you away completely, right? Because then you're really not going to be healthy. If you can do something and then come right back to it and get your health back in order, that's obviously a lot better than doing that and then keeping doing it and keeping doing it, and then you're back at square one.
Absolutely. It's important to try to stay consistent, do as much as you can, the best that you can, most of the time. And that goes into eating the best kind of foods most of the time.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe to get the next episode in 2 days.